some point. You know, you negotiate with your parents on your curfew. The little kids will negotiate whether they have to eat their vegetables or if they can eat their mac and cheese. I have to negotiate daily with my daughter where we're gonna eat, and every weekend what movie we're gonna go see. So everybody here has had some sort of negotiation experience in your own daily lives. And what negotiation, the outcome of negotiation is basically you're trying to find a resolution that everybody can live with. So there's a couple different types of negotiation. So obviously, like I said, in law school we learn different types. So there's positional bargaining, which is, you know, playing hardball, and it's a win-lose situation. That's what happens in contract negotiations. You have a land contract or any type of contract. Someone's there to win. Someone wants to get the better of the other party, and they want the terms to be in their favor. That's not so much the point of negotiation in the restorative justice world. Basically, what we're wanting in this world is you're having interest-based, integrative, and principal bargaining. So you're bargaining to find a resolution that works for both sides and that's fair. You're coming up with creative solutions. I believe, so I think in part of negotiation is knowing some of your solutions, have those in your arsenal of, especially in these cases, whether either side you're on, whether you're the youth advocate or whether you're the community advocate, you need to know the type of options that are gonna be available to your client. For whatever the case may be. So you really wanna make sure that you're really familiar with all the different varieties of options that you can be negotiating for your client and making sure your client will be agreeable to those. And as Patrick said too, so sometimes you have to take into account, there's different things to take into account, like if the family has transportation, so you may think, oh, well, maybe a good option to negotiate would be some counseling sessions, or there's some peer pressure classes that I've been, that people have discussed. But when we got into the restorative circle, the mom was like, you know, it's hard, I work, so, and it was a transportation issue. So you really wanna make sure you know the ins and outs of all your different options that you are negotiating with. But again, those are all creative solutions to come up with for your circle regarding any type of consequence that's gonna result. And so again, restorative justice negotiation, there's two sides. Obviously there's the referred youth and there's the community or the victim. And again, we want a fair resolution that both sides can agree upon. So I think we were also talking too about being prepared when you go in these circles, and things may come up. Another thing that came up in one of my circles was that they were doing the negotiation process, and it turned out that the youth had actually done some classes already. So they were trying to negotiate some different types of classes she could do. And she was about to agree to doing a whole set of classes, but then it turned out she and her mom actually had to spend 2 days doing peer pressuring classes. So you wanna make sure you know what your client has already done. So that's a really good reason too, to make sure you're also talking with your clients, getting their background, getting to know the whole big picture of the situation. And if they've actually already had to do any type of consequence, maybe through the school, maybe the school's already done something. So make sure you guys are aware of all of those things. Sure.
So you're saying to like be aware of not just your client, but also the other advocate's client?
No, just when you're, it'll come up when you're talking to the other advocate. So, you know, it's also being perfect when you asked, I think, you know, do you have to have this stuff when you're going into the circle? Are you gonna be ready? Do you talk to them before? Is this something done on the outside? Like Patrick said, it's fluid. I would think, you know, you're definitely, while you're talking to your client, you're also talking to the other advocate. And I'd say like week 2, towards the end of week 2, going into week 3, those are conversations you're probably gonna be wanting to have with the other advocate, is the starting kind of the negotiation process. You know, what is your client thinking? You know, is there anything that your client has mentioned that they would like to see from my client, and vice versa. If you're the youth advocate, you know, my client understands the gravity of the situation. They, you know, would be willing to do A, B, C, and so that's kind of how the negotiation process should kind of start. And you can definitely do that on the outside. And sometimes you guys may come to an agreement, but you also, it's not an agreement between the two advocates. You also have to make sure that it's an agreeable situation to your clients as well. So you don't wanna get to that circle and all of a sudden the advocates have talked and come up with all these great solutions and the clients are like, hey, that doesn't work for me. You know, or like Consuelo said, you know, if the kid says, hey, I want more than an apology letter, this kid needs to go to some counseling. So you have to make sure you're trying to get on that same page before you go into the circle, but, you know, things can arise. So who's gonna take part in negotiation, as we were just talking about? So the advocates, obviously, what I would be doing is talking to your client, whether it's the youth or the community. You're gonna be talking to your client, brainstorm together, the situation. So everybody's taking part is the short answer. Everyone takes part in negotiation. And you want your client to be aware of the others. So once you talk to the advocate, you can also let your client know, hey, I've talked to the advocate, the community advocate, and they're thinking that these might be, you know, workable solutions, and the community advocate would talk to their client, you know, the youth is willing to do ABC, so that kind of is all part of that negotiation process. Everybody should be involved, because again, you want it to become a solution that everybody is happy with. This isn't a win or lose situation. And when and how does negotiation happen? So on the telephone with your client, again, during that first week, you're not sitting there trying to, you know, talk to them about, here's the consequences, here's what's gonna happen, here's all the possible things that you may have to use. You're wanting to use that first couple weeks when you are talking to them, getting to know them, getting to know the background of the situation. This is a conversation with your client after that's all been established. You don't wanna jump right into, let's start negotiation process. You wanna get the big picture and the facts before you can start any type of negotiation. And again, talking to the other advocate, and again, coming to the circle, ready to discuss. So good negotiation skills, first they identify the interests of each party. Obviously the interests of the community advocate. What is the community advocate looking for? Anybody? What do you think your community advocate is looking for when you start talking to them about a negotiation?
Get the client a way for your victim to get closure.
Okay, closure for the victim, yeah. And what kind of negotiation is the youth looking for? James?
Like a fair, like, sort of consequence or punishment that's not too harsh, but also not too lenient.
Yeah.
It's like in the middle, where
Yeah.
it seems right.
And I think that'd be fair enough to say about the community as well, that, you know, the victim, they don't want something that's too lenient. But again, and as I said, this shouldn't feel like a win for either side, but it also shouldn't feel like a loss for either side. That's that different type of negotiation, that's contracts. What the negotiation process here, you want it to feel like everybody walked out of there thinking, hey, I think that was a fair result. So, and a reasonable outcome based on objective criteria. So this means basically, when you're negotiating, you're focusing on the harm. You're not focusing on the person. Any negotiation shouldn't be focused on the person or their behavior. It should be focused on the harm that was caused. So that makes it more focusing on objective criteria. So obviously you guys know that there's different types of cases you guys are gonna be dealing with. Such as there's the bullying, vaping, possession of, oh gosh, what is it? The vapes and drug paraphernalia, and fighting, or which they call the affrays. So I'm gonna start with bullying. So if you were a youth advocate, what types of ideas would you be suggesting or talking with your youth as possible things to bring to the negotiation table? In a bullying case.
Anger management.
Anger management, that's a good one. James?
Depending on the severity of the bullying, a general, like, I think good consequence is like seeing your school counselor, like maybe weekly or like on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else have any ideas?
See if they understand like how much they really do the other person, or if they do it to like report what they're really doing.
And how would they know that?
Like just seeing if they feel like guilty at all for what they did, and if they do, maybe then they're open to like going to like those classes
Yeah.
and stuff like that.
Yeah, I know, it's gonna be, sometimes when you're you're presenting, you know, hey, there's these classes and things like that, it is, and again, that's when that big picture comes in of, you know, the ability to get to classes, if there's online classes, so these are all kind of things, making sure you're looking into whether there's online classes. I think, I'm guessing you guys have a whole list of resources of different types of things that they can use as advocates to present.
We do, and we also let them come up with their own.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so, what about if you were the community advocate in a bullying case? What are you gonna be proposing in your negotiation?
Maybe the school could impose a consequence like detention or like possibly suspension if it's that severe.
Okay. Anyone else, James?
I think again what she said with the students really maybe try to have the school keep a distance between each other even though they've already talked. Maybe just keep a distance for like a short period of time.
Yeah.
So keep things cool down. Especially with if fathers are involved as well with the bullying.
Okay.
Just this things really nice.
Okay, so, and how would you propose that that get implemented?
With the help of the school administration.
Okay.
I didn't hear what his last part was, so it might be the same, but
Involving
maybe-
school administration.
Yeah, like maybe coming up with kind of like a backup plan if the bullying doesn't stop, right? So like maybe the school could get involved more, like separate them.
Definitely using your resources with the school administration and counselors and things, is a great tool to look at too. So as an advocate, you should be obviously reaching out to them to get their ideas as well. Okay, what about in a vaping or smoking? They're caught vaping or smoking, and you're which advocate would you be?
Me.
Okay, what?
Wait, no, like youth
You
advocate.
got it? Okay, what would you propose?
Depending on the severity of the issue, maybe the youth can go to like addiction counseling if they're that addicted to smoking.
Okay,
As you advocate, I would say the same thing as maybe if it was very, very severe, I would say going to rehab depending on transportation.
okay. So I'm just saying, so I think, so rehab for smoking or vaping, that might be an extreme
Okay.
kind of a consequence, cause there's a lot of different, things that go along with having rehab, but definitely like, there's gotta be some sort of, I think like addiction classes is a reasonable thing, but and sometimes some like youth rehab centers actually do offer kind of like an outpatient classes, so definitely make sure you're looking into that kind of stuff, and if there is somewhere around Las Vegas that does have that, again, sometimes, and some of them could be online classes, so I believe one of the circles I was in, her class for, I think it was a peer pressure class, which again, that could be, her peer pressure class, I think it was like an online thing, so make sure you know your resources. Do you have another one?
For vaping and smoking, maybe having them talk to someone to see if maybe there's a reason to fall out there.
Yeah, so counseling?
Yeah, counseling.
Okay. What if you're the community advocate? And what would you want to propose? I guess those will kind of, go both ways, community, so, I guess in this one, just make sure that when you're proposing classes and things, that there's the type of transportation, make sure you're kind of figuring all that stuff out as well when you're doing your, chats with your client, and especially if you're the youth advocate.
I think as a community advocate, if it were to occur again in like a school area, they would not only be confiscated but also taken immediately like through administration to discuss what they did wrong.
And that's gonna be part of your discussion with your client if you're the youth advocate is kind of finding out the underlying factors of maybe why, you never know, was it peer pressure, was it something going on at home that's causing them to, act out or do whatever they're doing, so, okay, session's kind of the same. What about an affray? If you're the youth advocate, what would you chat with your client about with, presenting as negotiation. Affray is the fight.
Separating the people involved, like if they're, like say it happened in like a classroom, maybe like put them on the opposite sides of the room or something like that.
In a way, like discipline or resistance classes, so like not be tempted to like engage in like conflict again, physical conflict.
So like conflict management
Yeah.
classes and courses. Yeah?
I would say like depending on like their relationship, like maybe like with like a school counselor, they could like talk more about like their relationship and like what they could do to like fix it so it doesn't like happen again.
Like so
Yeah.
suggesting counseling sessions and being willing to work with the victim on the
Mhm.
counseling sessions. Yep. What about if you are the school? What are you gonna be throwing out there as the school advocate?
Probably like some type of disciplinary action, like detention or something like that.
Mhm.
Maybe like staying after school, something like that.
Yeah, those are good. Those are all great resources. So again, just with your negotiations, I would just suggest making sure you definitely have your, know your resources and know your options. Cause just depending on what kind of case you're dealing with, there's a lot of different options out there to, do, and know also the situation of, I think, for the youth advocates in the negotiation process, get to know your youth so that you know what kind of things will work for them as well, cause you obviously want this to be successful, and I think both sides can agree that they want this to be successful, to get resolved, and also, and to be fair. So just keeping all that in mind, and I think the one thing, that I've also seen in some of these circles, which I think we also discussed, there is, you know, even though Timmy was hit in the face, there's a lot of times, proposing writing a letter to the victim, whether it was, say, it's a bullying thing, maybe writing a letter to the victim, or if it's an affray. Things with the vaping and smoking or possibly possession. You know, parents have had to get involved, so one of the things you may want to suggest as a negotiation as part of is like a letter to their parents, a letter to the school, apologizing, cause there is an effect that it's having on the family, there's an effect it's also having on their peers at school when they're getting in trouble and doing things they're not supposed to be doing. So those are all great ideas. Does anyone have any questions negotiation wise? Alright, wanna try to help?
Alright.
It's so tiny.
So you guys, this is like for mice.
Yeah. Definitely not for my eyes.
Oh,
That's why I was like looking that way.
Alright, so I am here to talk to you guys about research, and that's kind of a big topic, and I think that you guys are familiar with it, but there's just a couple of high points we're gonna go over. And
This is next.
so, do you guys do a lot of research for school? I thought so. Okay, tell me about that. What do you, does anybody have a recent example of some research they were doing for school? Oh, are you in summer school? Is it summer now? You're not in school. I don't know. It's
Did you write a paper in your last school year?
Yeah, I don't know. We don't get summer break. Yeah.
I wrote a paper on like the effect of social media on teenagers, like their mental health.
Okay, that's a great one. How did you go about doing that?
My school has like a program that like they like pay for. I can't remember what it's called. It's like a Bisco Post, I think. But we like use that, and it gives us like a ton of articles that we can use that are like valuable, like not like just random people writing things. Like they're actually like true.
Okay, got it. Yeah. And that's important, right? To make sure that you're reading something that's not just some person typing into Twitter in an angry rage, right? That's not a source. Can we all agree? Okay, great. So online resources. Let me back up a step, because Olivia was talking to you guys about the negotiation process and coming up with solutions, right? How do you figure out what solutions are available? Hint, it might be research. Okay, yeah.
You can look at previous examples of whatever situation you're dealing with.
That's a great example, and that's what lawyers do every day. When you have to make a point to the judge, you say, hey judge, here's this other case, and it's just like my case, and you should agree with me, right? So that's how you do it as a lawyer, and I think it works in this case too. So how would you, let's follow that through. How would you've got a bullying case. And you need to research what kind of solutions you could propose.
I would like look at like the extent of the bullying and see like what were like the specific examples and like see if there were any like matching cases. So like if a certain like part of a previous case was like similar to mine, like how it was like repeated like for a really long time, if that case is similar versus one that was like only a short period of time, I would look at the longer period of time if it was closer to my case, and I would see what did they do and if that fit like my situation.
Okay, and I like what you're saying, that you would look at cases that are similar or dissimilar, I think this is what you're saying, and sort of say, well, I need to be with this one that's more close to what actually happened in my case, right? And I think that makes sense, and I think that ties into what Olivia is saying about the negotiation being fair, right? Because you don't want to take a bullying case that has a really severe example and apply it to your very minor case. Yeah, James.
In a scenario where there's no similar cases, I like to think like I don't think it's really effective in my opinion, but I like to think hypothetical. So like say like a bullying case. So I like think in my head like what's a good response or a clear like consequence for that can like match the severity of bullying. So let's say like counseling. I think that in my head I think that's fair enough in terms of the bullying. I just think hypothetical.
I think that's a good place to start, and I think what we're going to do is we're going to, in some other slides I'm going to sort of talk about the process that I use, and I think a lot of lawyers use, which is to start, maybe not hypothetically, but certainly you can, but start in a broad sense, right? And then you kind of drill down. So, okay, we've got online resources, we've got looking at other cases. What about picking up the phone and calling somebody? So if you're a community advocate and you want to know what kind of school resources there are, could you pick up the phone and call the school and call the counselor, right? That's a form of research too. And I think that's the kind of research that you are going to want to do more in this program than you would say for a research paper. Does that make sense? And I think you can apply that to the youth advocate as well, right? Because you're doing research but in a different way. So as the youth advocate, you're going to want to drill down and talk with your client, right? So what's going on at home? That kind of thing. And you can start to sort of look at resources for the youth in terms of like for bullying or something like you could search for the causes of bullying, like, and sort of identify different stuff that way. I don't know. Okay, so I think that's it. Here's the way that I do it. And this is probably, you guys are probably pros at this, so I'm probably preaching to the choir, but when I've got a research assignment, here's what I like to do. I break it down first into the essence of what I need. So I'm going to look at what my goal is. What am I trying to do? So I'm trying to write a paper on social media and adolescent kids, is that what it is? Yeah, so that's kind of the goal, and that kind of forms your approach. And then you want to start identifying sources and places where you can look for information, like online databases or other cases, or calling the school, or you know, if you guys don't read the newspaper, but you know, the newspaper.
I don't think they make newspapers anymore, do they?
Have you ever heard of a newspaper?
What's that?
So I try to start as broad as possible, right? And you guys have kind of learned this in school, right? You start with big picture, like Olivia was saying, and then you kind of try to narrow it down until you can figure out exactly what you're looking for. So if you're a community advocate and and the participant or the youth brought marijuana to school, what is something as the advocate that you're going to want to be prepared with? Like, what information do you wanna show up at the circle with that's gonna help address and help show to the youth why this is a problem? Like, what information would you wanna know to support your position that bringing marijuana to school is bad? Yeah.
How marijuana can affect kids.
Okay, yeah, that's a great one. So where would you go to find out? I mean, I think that we can all say, you know, marijuana is bad for kids, right? But how do you show that? Where do you go to look for that information?
Could go obviously to the internet, but like
But where?
do you mean like what people go to?
I mean, like, you're gonna type in a Google search and you
Right.
say, why is marijuana bad for kids?
Oh, you can go to
What's your favorite search engine?
Yeah. Is it Bing.com?
Yeah. Oh my god, you're really aging yourself today.
I would go to more so of like neurological site that like
Okay.
talks about how it affects the brain and all that
Okay.
stuff.
Yeah, that's excellent. Because, what's the reason? Is it because like a doctor and a medical site would probably have some good, reliable information, right? James.
I was gonna say like if we're like starting like really broad, I was thinking like health related information that like has statistics that like has proven that marijuana is bad for young teens and adults.
Yeah, yeah, so that's good. So do you guys kind of see like the premise there that you're gonna go into your circle with some ideas about why something is bad or not, but you're gonna need to be able to support your position, right? Just like Olivia and I have to do every time we talk to anybody. So it's great that you guys are already thinking about what reliable sources are. I think especially for your generation, you guys grew up on the internet, and there is so much information available to you immediately, and it can be tricky sometimes to evaluate what is reliable and not. So after that, after we kind of identify my sources, you kind of want to evaluate them, like I said, to make sure that you're citing to something or saying something that has some kind of reliability. And just going into reliability a little bit more. So you guys are aware that TikTok is not a reliable source of information.
Really?
No matter how much they're trying to tell you how to do things.
Okay. Just to clarify. So what would you do if you saw a TikTok, and I feel I'm a million years old speaking to you guys about this, and it said marijuana is really bad for kids and it really impacts the brain. And that's the premise of the TikTok, right? And you're like, that seems right. What would you do then to check it? Yeah.
See if a more reliable source says the same thing.
Yeah, great. And what would a more reliable source than TikTok be? Literally anything?
I'd say like any like
Twitter.
like for that one, I'd say like a scientific like peer reviewed journal or something.
Yeah, okay, great. You guys are just making my job so easy. Yeah, you're gonna wanna check a more reliable source. Again, and I think you guys know this at this point, you guys know the difference between someone's opinion being angrily typed into Twitter versus a fact, right? So we're gonna wanna go into the circle with facts, not opinions. And that kind of that will help you keep the conversation and help the facilitator and help everyone involved keep this conversation geared toward the behavior and not the person. Wikipedia. What is one problem with Wikipedia? Yeah.
I know you can edit it.
Yeah, very good. These kids are so smart.
Quick question, I please.
But when you're reading a Wikipedia article, there's like a source, right? Usually, sometimes. If there's not a source, it's probably a red flag. But if you check the source and it's the CDC, maybe you could trust that information, right? Do you guys know what lateral reading is? Anybody? So maybe I can actually teach you guys something today, but you don't already know.
Oh, I kind of
Is
guess.
that what you can get?
Did you just like read like
been talking about it. Yeah, it is. Is that what you were gonna say?
Like you put different sources next to each other, maybe? Or like-
Not that so much, but it's sort of like when you're reading Wikipedia and it says, the sky is blue and there's like a little footnote. And you click the footnote and the footnote is Scientific American or something and it says, we know that the sky is blue, XYZ. So when you're reading the Wikipedia about the color of the sky and you see that there's a site there, you're going to laterally move to check that site as you go.
To confirm.
To confirm it. And that's a good way to know that what you are reading and what you're absorbing is reliable. And I also think that that's a good way to check in with your source, right? Because if you are reading a source that is saying a bunch of information but there's no citations, or you find out that the citation is not really saying what they're saying it says, then maybe you're going to call into question that source and maybe you want to move on. That make sense?
Yeah.
Alright. And I think you guys, why is that important? Why is it important to lateral read and spell check? Yes.
And that it's reliable.
Yes. Alright, so this sort of goes along with what we were talking about, but just make sure that you're evaluating the stuff that you're looking at, the data, the text, photos, videos. You're looking for facts and opinions. We sort of talked about this. You're looking for credible sources. We don't want you to show up to a circle and say, I know for sure that vaping is, I don't know, not bad or whatever. Just make sure that you have some basis for what you're saying. We've talked about this. Credible sources, peer-reviewed papers, government data, stuff that you can verify another way. Always ask where information comes from. Ask yourself, obviously. So, okay, now, how do we apply all those ideas to this program? Like, why am I talking about this? Other than just I love talking to you guys. Yeah.
If the information that you're looking for, the research you're looking for, if you think it's a good idea, you have to pretend that it actually, like, I guess, it works in essence, and like, that it'll have a good outcome for not only the victim, but also the referee.
Okay, that makes sense to me. Does everybody agree with that? Yeah, okay. And so, another way I kind of want to pose this to you is I think another way you can use your research skills in this program is to think outside the box and come up with resolutions. Because we don't want to give you just a list of classes and say, okay, pick one of these classes. We want you to really come up with solutions that work and are tailored to the actual case in front of you, right? So you're going to want to research what would work, what would help, what would be beneficial. You're going to want to do some of the secondary type of research, I would call it, of like calling the school or calling different counseling programs or just doing your own research to see what kind of courses and stuff is available. Yeah?
What's even the extent of what we're allowed to do?
That's a good question.
Also, another question like that. So let's say we're calling a school for asking like what resources they have. Like, how would we introduce ourselves? Like, we're with this program.
Yeah. Well, let me get to that in a second. So your question was, how do you know what you can do?
Yeah, like what's the extent of what we can assign somebody to do?
Well, I think
That's a good question.
it is a good question.
I think that if you're questioning, like we said, when you're going into the circle, you kind of have an idea of what you're thinking about. That would be a good question, a good time to talk to this well or myself, and then we can kind of well, we could probably do that, but we probably can't do this. So we could help you navigate through that situation. But at the end of the day, we do have some fixed guidelines or options that are available. But if you're gonna go beyond that scope, then definitely talk to Fitzwell and say, this is what we're thinking of. And then she can start doing the background on it and see if that would be something feasible.
And I think also, and I'll get to James in a second, but I think that your clients are a really good resource too, as far as what's possible. So if you're talking to either the community or the youth, and the youth says, I'm really interested in this anger management class because I heard that my friend took it and I think it would really help me or something. And even if it's not something that we've ever used before, it's something that you can talk to us about making work. Does that make sense? And if you're talking to a school, maybe that particular school or counselor is aware of a resource that we're not aware of. And how would you know if you hadn't done any research, right?
And I think too, like if you're questioning yourself if something, if you're questioning yourself that this might be too far, that's also a good indication that it might be. So trust your judgment, because you guys are all, I think you guys are all smart and old enough to kind of trust your judgment and think, like obviously you're not gonna be like, okay, this person was a bully and now I think we're gonna go to a scared straight at juvenile hall. Like that might be a little, but you have to kind of think like, do trust your judgment, because you'll know if you're questioning if something's too harsh, then it probably is.
And James, remind me of your question.
Like how, so if you were contacting like an official like school or like asking resources, like how would they know they're like, or like, I don't know, like being serious while we're like asking for it?
Yeah. Does everybody hear the question? I think it's a really good question. I mean, I like to just pick up the phone and try and see what happens. But
But they're gonna know because they're the ones that made the referral.
yeah,
Oh,
they
yeah.
are.
So most likely they're gonna know, and then if you haven't, you wanna talk to a certain teacher, we could also make that introduction for you, and then help you guide you through that process as well, but.
Yeah. And then I think the mechanics of the actual phone call are gonna feel weird, right? But you're gonna just have to kind of get through it, and my best advice for that honestly is just to pick up, you don't pick up a phone like this anymore, but
I'm always calling. I use my phone more than I use my email to get in touch with people, because you'd be surprised how much miscommunication can happen. And then all of a sudden you're going back and forth trying to you're sitting here explaining who you are. They're asking questions. Sometimes the quickest way and the easiest way to get in touch with someone and get that communication started is a phone call.
And a lot of times, if they don't believe that you're legit, they'll call us and say, hey, this, and then we'll tell them who you are. We've done that in the past as well, so definitely pick up that phone call and give them a call, just introduce who you are and what you're doing, and
my name is Tabitha. I am working with the Clark County Law Foundation, and I've got a case referred to me, and I'm really interested in seeing what resources you have available. I was wondering who I could talk to about that. And then you see what happens. And if they're like, I don't know who you are, let me get a name and number and I'll call you back, then try again tomorrow. See, I thought about this. Make connections and phone calls. Okay, so does this all make sense in the context of what you guys are gonna be doing? Okay. And you guys, that's really all that I have. I have a link here. Do you guys watch Crash Course? Crash Course? You do? Okay. Yeah, I like those. I think they're kind of fun. So they've got a really good one on navigating digital information. Maybe you've seen it. It's a good one.
You're trying to tell me what that is today. I was like,
I was telling
but I'm glad you guys all know.
I was telling Olivia that I'm pretty sure her daughter has probably seen these videos or knows what they are. I know about them from TikTok, even though I'm ancient. Do you guys have any questions for us? Any open-ended questions? You've got two lawyers here who can answer your questions if you have any.
Was there something else that we needed to go over with them that we haven't covered?
That's it.
No questions?
I would
Sure.
love to bring like maybe like a notepad to kind of just like jot down like a note, like remembering what we wanted to do with it.
Yeah. Just being prepared, yeah.
Yeah.
Don't think that you can't have, don't think you have to have everything in here. I mean, half the time I'm going, oh God, what was I supposed to say about this slide? That's why I have to read them too. But yeah, no, I mean, anytime you're going to a hearing, we go to hearings, we we bring all the pleadings with us, even though we've read them, we've studied them, we know our argument. I have my notepad, I've got all my backup pleadings, I've got some research if I needed it, in case in case the judge asks, you've got all your backup, so yeah, it's good to have any material you think you need, sure.
Yeah, and I always, like Olivia's saying, we bring all of our paper and notes and stuff, and always a pen and paper, because, even when I'm facilitating circles, I bring a pen and paper, because stuff comes up in conversation, and the conversation moves kind of quickly, and you wanna make sure that you're taking notes so that you can kind of return to the items that you think are important.